India, a nation of vibrant dynamism, where ancient traditions meet the soaring ambitions of the 21st century. Its cities pulse with energy, its technological prowess astounds, a compelling narrative of progress presented to the world. But this narrative often casts a long shadow over a devastatingly persistent reality, a truth spoken more in hushed tones than in open discourse. Consider this. In 2022 alone, India officially recorded over 31,500 rapes. That's nearly 87 lives shattered every single day. These statistics, as chilling as they are, likely represent only the tip of a monstrous iceberg. The visible scars of a crisis largely submerged beneath waves of societal silence, deep-seated stigma, and the paralyzing fear of victims. This is far more than a tally of criminal acts. It is a profound human rights crisis, a systemic corrosion of safety and dignity that demands our urgent attention. What does it mean when the path to justice is itself a further ordeal? This film ventures beyond the stark numbers, seeking to understand the intricate roots of this epidemic, its far-reaching consequences, and the courageous, often lonely, battles for meaningful change. This is a difficult yet vital exploration into a subject that demands our attention. In the upcoming segments, we delve deeper into how landmark cases have irrevocably shaped India's laws and public consciousness, examine the persistent systemic challenges survivors face in their fight for justice, and highlight the critical importance of shifting societal mindsets. You'll also witness powerful stories of resilience and the tireless work being done to forge a safer future for all. If you believe these narratives must be heard and this conversation is essential, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing for more crucial in-depth content. We warmly invite your thoughtful and respectful comments below. This dialogue truly matters. Stay with us for the remainder of our investigation. Understanding the full scope of this issue is key to recognizing the pathways towards meaningful change and genuine hope. India, a nation of vibrant dynamism, where ancient traditions meet the soaring ambitions of the 21st century. Its cities pulse with energy, its technological prowess astounds, a compelling narrative of progress presented to the world. This is a land of immense potential, a tapestry of cultures and aspirations, seemingly racing towards a brighter future. But this narrative often casts a long shadow over a devastatingly persistent reality, a truth spoken more in hushed tones than in open discourse, a wound that continues to fester beneath the surface of everyday life. Consider this stark figure. In 2022 alone, India officially recorded over 31,500 rapes. That's nearly 87 lives irrevocably shattered every single day. A relentless daily toll. And these statistics, as chilling and precise as they sound, likely represent only the tip of a monstrous iceberg. The visible scars of a crisis largely submerged beneath waves of societal silence, deep-seated stigma, and the paralyzing fear that often envelops victims and their families. One must ask, how many more stories remain untold? How many cries for help go unheard, when the very act of speaking out can invite further trauma or ostracization? This is far more than a tally of criminal acts. It is a profound human rights crisis, a systemic corrosion of safety and human dignity that demands our urgent, unflinching attention. It's an epidemic that seeps into every corner of society, challenging the fundamental right of women and girls to live free from fear. The numbers are a starting point, a grim indicator, but they cannot convey the depth of the trauma, the shattered trust, the lives forever altered. They cannot articulate the courage it takes for a survivor to even contemplate seeking justice in a system that can often feel indifferent or worse, hostile. Therefore, to truly understand the scale and nature of this crisis, we must venture beyond the stark figures, into the complex interplay of culture, power, law, and the deeply ingrained attitudes that allow such violence to persist. What does it mean for a society when the path to justice for survivors of sexual violence is itself a further, agonizing ordeal? This film will embark on that difficult journey. We will seek to understand the intricate roots of this epidemic, to examine its far-reaching consequences not just for individuals but for the nation as a whole, and to highlight the courageous, often lonely, battles being fought for meaningful, lasting change. It's an exploration of pain but also of resilience, of systemic failures but also of the relentless pursuit of accountability. Perhaps no single event ripped through India's collective conscience and forced a national reckoning with sexual violence quite like the case that came to be known simply, and tragically, as Nirbhaya. It was December 2012 in the heart of the nation's capital, New Delhi. A 23-year-old physiotherapy intern, a young woman full of dreams and aspirations, representing a new generation of Indian women stepping out, claiming their space, was returning home with a male friend after watching a movie. What happened next was an act of such unspeakable brutality, a gang rape and assault so savage, that it sent shockwaves not just across India but around the globe. The sheer barbarity of the crime, the calculated cruelty inflicted upon her, was beyond comprehension for many. Nirbhaya, a name meaning fearless that was posthumously given to her by the media to protect her identity, fought valiantly for her life for 13 days but ultimately succumbed to her horrific injuries. Her death was not in vain. It became a watershed moment. The initial grief and horror quickly morphed into an unprecedented outpouring of public anger and protest. Tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of ordinary citizens, students, women, men from all walks of life took to the streets, not just in Delhi but in cities across the country. They braved cold winter nights, water cannons, and police barricades, their voices raw with anguish and a singular, powerful demand: justice for Nirbhaya and an end to the culture of impunity surrounding sexual violence. It was as if a dam of suppressed frustration had finally burst. The protests were a visceral rejection of the societal apathy and systemic failures that allowed such crimes to occur with terrifying regularity. One might reflect, what was it about this particular case that ignited such a firestorm? Perhaps it was the sheer, unimaginable cruelty. Perhaps it was her identity as an aspiring middle-class professional, a symbol of India's youth striving for a better life, making the attack feel deeply personal to so many. Or perhaps it was simply the last straw, a collective realization that silence and inaction were no longer an option. Therefore, under immense public pressure, the Indian government was compelled to act. A judicial committee, headed by former Chief Justice J.S. Verma, was swiftly constituted to review and recommend amendments to criminal laws related to sexual assault. The committee worked at remarkable speed, producing a comprehensive report that formed the basis of the Criminal Law Act of 2013, widely known as the Nirbhaya Act. This new legislation was significant. It expanded the definition of rape, introduced new offenses like acid attacks and stalking, and prescribed stricter, including mandatory minimum, punishments for sexual offenders, even including the death penalty in the rarest of rare cases of rape leading to death or a persistent vegetative state. The act also addressed issues like voyeurism and trafficking, and importantly, it criminalized sexual harassment by those in positions of authority, like police officers in custody. The age of consent was firmly established. It seemed, on paper at least, like a robust response, a legal fortification against sexual violence. But the question that began to emerge, even as the new laws were being drafted and passed, was a more profound one. Can laws alone truly change a society? Can they penetrate the deeply entrenched patriarchal mindsets that often view women as objects, or blame victims for the violence inflicted upon them? The Nirbhaya case undoubtedly led to increased public discourse about sexual violence, a topic previously shrouded in taboo. It brought the conversation out from behind closed doors and into the national spotlight. Fast-track courts were also mandated to expedite trials of rape cases. Yet, nearly a decade after this supposed watershed moment, as we examine the landscape, the uncomfortable truth is that the fight is far from over. While the Nirbhaya Act provided a stronger legal arsenal, its implementation on the ground, the actual delivery of justice to countless survivors, continues to be fraught with challenges. The outrage was real, the legal changes were tangible, but has the fundamental culture of respect and safety for women genuinely taken root across the vast and complex expanse of India? Or did the Nirbhaya moment, for all its sound and fury, ultimately prove to be more of a temporary catharsis than a catalyst for deep, sustained, systemic transformation? This is the lingering question that echoes in the stories of so many who continue to seek justice in its wake. The wound was exposed, but whether it has truly begun to heal is another matter entirely. The nationwide anguish following the Nirbhaya case, and the subsequent strengthening of India's laws against sexual violence, certainly signaled a powerful intent. The Criminal Law Act of 2013, born from that collective outcry, was comprehensive on paper, promising stricter penalties and a broader definition of sexual offenses. It felt like a new dawn, a moment where the nation collectively said, "Enough is enough." But as the dust settled on the protests and the ink dried on the new statutes, a far more complex and stubborn reality began to assert itself. The chasm between laws written in Parliament and justice delivered on the ground remained, for many survivors, devastatingly wide. The first, and often most daunting, hurdle is the police station itself. For a survivor, already traumatized, summoning the courage to report a rape can be met with apathy, suspicion, or even outright hostility from some officers. The process of filing a First Information Report, or FIR, can become an ordeal of questioning and re-traumatization, sometimes colored by biases related to the victim's class, caste, or perceived character. And even if an FIR is registered, the path through the labyrinthine Indian legal system is long and arduous. Cases can drag on for years, sometimes decades, a slow grind that depletes a survivor's emotional and financial resources. Evidence collection can be flawed, forensic facilities overburdened, and witness protection often inadequate, leaving survivors vulnerable to intimidation or pressure to withdraw their cases. Therefore, it's perhaps not surprising, though no less tragic, that conviction rates in rape cases remain distressingly low, hovering around 27 to 28% in recent years. This means that for every 4 cases that go to trial, roughly 3 do not result in a conviction for rape. What does this statistic truly say to a survivor seeking validation and accountability? It whispers a chilling message. The law may be on your side, but the system might not be. The battle for justice becomes infinitely more perilous when the crime intersects with the deeply entrenched fault lines of caste and power. These are not merely individual crimes committed in a vacuum. They often reflect and perpetuate brutal social hierarchies. The Hathras case from September 2020 in Uttar Pradesh serves as a horrifying illustration. A 19-year-old Dalit woman was subjected to a savage gang rape and left with injuries so severe she died 2 weeks later. The accused were all from a dominant upper caste. But the horror was compounded by the alleged actions of the authorities. The family claimed the police initially delayed filing their complaint and that the victim was denied timely and adequate medical care. Most egregiously, her body was allegedly cremated by the police in the middle of the night, without the family's consent, preventing them from performing last rites, an act widely seen as an attempt to destroy evidence and silence a grieving, marginalized family. The initial denials by officials that rape had even occurred only fueled further outrage. Therefore, despite national condemnation and a CBI investigation, the outcome of the trial in early 2023 was a devastating blow. 3 of the 4 accused were acquitted of rape and murder charges. Only one was convicted of culpable homicide not amounting to murder. For many Dalit activists and human rights defenders, the verdict was a painful affirmation of a system perceived to be biased against them, where the life and dignity of a Dalit woman seemed to carry less weight. When caste identity can so heavily influence the course of justice, what hope remains for equality before the law? If the Hathras case highlighted the vulnerability of those at the bottom of the social hierarchy, the Unnao rape case exposed the terrifying impunity that political power can sometimes afford. In 2017, a 17-year-old girl from Unnao, also in Uttar Pradesh, accused Kuldeep Singh Sengar, a powerful sitting member of the Legislative Assembly from the ruling BJP, of rape. What followed was not a swift investigation, but a campaign of terror against the survivor and her family. Her father was arrested by the police on dubious charges and died in judicial custody, allegedly after being brutally assaulted by Sengar's brother and associates. The survivor herself attempted self-immolation outside the chief minister's residence to draw attention to her plight. Then, in a chilling turn of events in July 2019, the car in which she was traveling with her lawyer and 2 aunts was hit by a truck with a blackened license plate. Both aunts were killed and she and her lawyer were critically injured. It felt like a brazen attempt to silence her forever. The web of intimidation was so pervasive, so blatant, that it was only after the Supreme Court of India intervened, responding to national outrage and the survivors' desperate pleas, that the cases against Sengar were transferred out of Uttar Pradesh for a fair trial. Therefore, Sengar was eventually convicted in December 2019 and sentenced to life imprisonment. Justice was served, but at an almost unimaginable cost, raising the terrifying question: how many survivors are silenced long before their voices can ever reach the highest courts, crushed by the weight of political power and a complicit local system? The deep-seated frustration with a justice system perceived as slow, inefficient, and sometimes biased can lead to a dangerous public appetite for instant or even vigilante justice. This was starkly evident in the aftermath of the brutal gang rape and murder of Priyanka Reddy, a 26-year-old veterinarian in Hyderabad in November 2019, a case that drew chilling parallels to Nirbhaya. As details of her ordeal emerged, public fury reached a fever pitch. A few days later, the 4 men arrested in connection with the crime were killed by police in an alleged encounter. A shootout, supposedly while they were being taken to reconstruct the crime scene and tried to escape. News of their deaths was met with widespread public celebration. People distributed sweets to police officers, showered them with flower petals, and hailed them as heroes. It seemed for many like justice had been delivered swiftly and decisively. But this narrative of encounter justice soon began to unravel. Human rights activists and legal experts raised serious questions about the authenticity of the police version of events, fearing it was a case of extrajudicial killings. Therefore, the Supreme Court appointed a 3-member inquiry commission headed by retired Supreme Court Judge V.S. Surpurkar. After an exhaustive investigation, the commission concluded in May 2022 that the encounter was faked, that the police version was unbelievable, and that the suspects had been deliberately fired upon with an intent to cause their death. The commission recommended that 10 police officers involved be tried for murder. The Disha encounter, as it came to be known, starkly highlights a perilous crossroads. A public so disillusioned with due process that it cheers for extrajudicial killings, and a state apparatus that might be tempted to deliver such justice to appease public anger or mask investigative deficiencies. But when the rule of law is bypassed, even for the most heinous crimes, what protects society from descending into a cycle of vengeance and unchecked state power? In an attempt to address the chronic delays that fuel such public frustration, fast-track special courts, or FTSCs, were proposed and established across India, particularly after the Nirbhaya case, to specifically deal with cases of rape and offenses under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offenses Act. The aim was clear: to provide speedy trials and justice to survivors. By early 2024, hundreds of such courts were reportedly functional, but the promise of swift justice has often been hampered by persistent systemic issues. Many FTSCs reportedly grapple with inadequate infrastructure, a shortage of trained judges, prosecutors, and support staff, and the sheer volume of cases. While the intention is to dispose of cases within a year, the reality is often a much longer timeline. If these special courts are not adequately resourced and empowered, do they risk becoming just another layer in an already overburdened system? A fast track in name only. The battle for justice is not just about creating new courts. It's about ensuring the entire ecosystem, from sensitive and efficient policing to timely forensic analysis, robust victim support, and effective judicial processing, functions with integrity and a profound sense of urgency. Without that, the scales of justice will continue to feel heavily weighted against the survivor. The battle for justice, as we've seen, is fraught with systemic obstacles, where the weight of entrenched power, societal prejudice, and institutional inertia often seems overwhelming. It can paint a picture of despair, a landscape where survivors are left to navigate a labyrinth of pain and disappointment. But even in the face of such daunting realities, the human spirit possesses an extraordinary capacity for resilience, for defiance, and for transforming trauma into a catalyst for change. Across India, courageous individuals are breaking the suffocating silence that has long surrounded sexual violence. Survivors are stepping forward, not just to seek justice for themselves, but to reclaim their narratives, to challenge the stigma, and to light the path for others who might still be lost in the darkness. Their journey is rarely easy. Speaking out often means confronting not only the trauma of the assault itself, but also the potential for disbelief, victim blaming from their own communities, families, or even from the authorities. It means reliving their pain through invasive investigations and protracted court battles. Yet, they persist. Each testimony shared, each story told, chips away at the edifice of shame and impunity that protects perpetrators. Some survivors have become powerful activists, using their experiences to educate, to advocate for legal and social reforms, and to create support networks for others. They transform their personal agony into public purpose, embodying a strength that is both humbling and profoundly inspiring. Their voices, once suppressed, are now becoming a formidable force, demanding to be heard, demanding accountability, and most importantly, demanding a future where such violations are no longer an accepted or ignored part of life. It is in their courage that we find the most potent antidote to despair. This fight for justice and dignity is not waged in isolation. It is amplified and supported by a vibrant and often tenacious civil society. Non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, across India play a critical role on the front lines. They are often the first point of contact for survivors, providing essential legal aid to navigate the complex judicial system, offering counseling and psychological support to help heal invisible wounds, and in some cases, providing safe shelter. Beyond direct support, these organizations are also powerful advocates, meticulously documenting cases, researching systemic failures, lobbying for policy changes, and working tirelessly to raise public awareness. They act as watchdogs, holding authorities accountable, and as bridges, connecting survivors with the resources they desperately need. Their work, often carried out with limited resources and in the face of considerable resistance, is an indispensable part of the ecosystem of change. The media, too, wield significant influence in shaping the narrative around sexual violence. At its best, it can be a powerful ally. Investigative journalism can expose hidden crimes, amplify the voices of survivors, and create sustained public pressure that compels authorities to act. The Nirbhaya case itself is a testament to this potential, where media coverage was instrumental in galvanizing nationwide protests and pushing for legal reform. Responsible reporting can educate the public, challenge myths and misconceptions about rape, and foster a climate where survivors feel safer coming forward. But the media's role is a delicate balancing act, a tightrope walk over a chasm of potential harm. The relentless 24/7 news cycle and the pressure for sensationalism can lead to reporting that is intrusive, that re-traumatizes victims, or that inadvertently perpetuates harmful stereotypes and victim-blaming narratives. The identity of survivors, legally protected, is sometimes carelessly hinted at or revealed. The gruesome details of assaults can be exploited for viewership, overshadowing the systemic issues or the survivor's journey towards justice. The Press Council of India has laid down guidelines for ethical reporting on such sensitive matters, stressing the need for utmost caution, respect for privacy, and an avoidance of sensationalism. Therefore, the challenge for the media is to remain a catalyst for justice and awareness, without becoming a party to further victimization. It's a responsibility that requires constant vigilance, ethical training, and a commitment to prioritizing the dignity of the survivor above all else. Ultimately, however, legal reforms, judicial activism, and media scrutiny, while crucial, can only go so far if the underlying societal attitudes that condone or trivialize sexual violence remain unchanged. The roots of this epidemic lie deep within patriarchal structures that have, for centuries, normalized gender inequality, controlled women's sexuality, and fostered a culture where blame is often shifted from the perpetrator to the victim. Phrases like "what was she wearing?" "Why was she out so late?" or "she must have provoked him" are not just thoughtless remarks. They are manifestations of a deeply ingrained mindset that seeks to excuse male aggression and police female behavior. Therefore, a truly transformative change requires a revolution in hearts and minds. This is the long, patient work of education, not just in schools, but in homes, in communities, in religious institutions, and in public discourse. It means comprehensively teaching children, from a young age, about respect, bodily autonomy, gender equality, and the unequivocal meaning of consent. It's about challenging traditional notions of masculinity that equate manhood with aggression or dominance, and encouraging men and boys to become active allies in preventing violence, to speak out against sexism and misogyny amongst their peers. It involves creating safe spaces for open conversations about sexuality, relationships, and rights, free from shame or judgment. This cultural shift is perhaps the most challenging, but also the most fundamental aspect of eradicating sexual violence. It's about nurturing a society where every individual understands that no means no, and where the dignity of every person is held inviolable. The path forward in confronting the pervasive issue of rape in India is undoubtedly arduous, strewn with systemic failures, societal resistance, and the enduring pain of countless individuals. The statistics remain grim. The quest for justice often feels like an uphill battle against formidable odds, and the deep-seated attitudes that perpetuate violence are not easily dislodged. It would be easy to succumb to cynicism, to view the problem as too vast, too intractable. But to do so would be to ignore the powerful currents of change that are also at play. It would be to dismiss the extraordinary courage of survivors who are turning their trauma into testimony, the relentless dedication of activists and grassroots organizations who are fighting for a more just world, and the slow, yet perceptible shifts in public consciousness that are beginning to challenge age-old norms. Legal reforms, however imperfectly implemented, do provide new tools. Increased media attention, when responsible, does foster greater awareness. And every individual who chooses to question patriarchal attitudes to support a survivor or to educate their children about respect and consent becomes an agent of that change. This is not a battle that can be won overnight, nor is it one with simple solutions. It requires a sustained, multi-pronged commitment from all sections of society, from the government to ensure robust law enforcement and judicial efficacy, from educational institutions to instill values of equality and respect, from community leaders to challenge harmful traditions, from the media to report responsibly and ethically, and from each individual to foster a culture of zero tolerance for sexual violence. The journey towards an India free from the scourge of rape is long, and the shadows are indeed deep. But the voices demanding change are growing louder. The resolve to fight for a safer, more equitable future is strengthening. And within that collective determination lies the most profound reason for hope. It is a hope rooted not in naivety, but in the unwavering belief in the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of justice. The silence is breaking, and in its place, a new narrative of confrontation, healing, and ultimately transformation is beginning to be written. Our journey exploring these profound and sometimes painful realities now draws to a close. Though we've confronted many challenges and uneasy truths, we've also witnessed the extraordinary power of resilience and the unyielding aspiration for a just future, where human dignity is paramount. May what has been shared linger in your thoughts and hearts, perhaps inspiring reflection and contributing, even in small ways, to building a society that listens more intently, understands more deeply, and values every individual with greater respect. Thank you sincerely for your attention and for joining us throughout this exploration. Farewell, and until we meet again.